This is the moderator of the meeting. Welcome to the Dispensing Optician Committee meeting. Before we get started, I would like to remind committee members and senior staff who are not speaking to mute their microphone. If I detect background noise during the meeting as a result of unmuted microphones, I will provide a brief friendly reminder or simply mute the microphone. For members of the public, if you raise your hand, we will not be calling on you. However, we will have times of public comment, which we will announce, and that will give you an opportunity to make a comment. To facilitate public comment, we will be utilizing the WebEx question and answer feature. When committee chair reaches a point in the agenda at which public comment is appropriate, the public comment will be requested, and at the board's direction, I will turn on and announce the opening of the Q&A feature. If any attendees utilize a profane name, they will not be called upon to prevent members of the public from being subjected to profane language. While you're free to express criticism or negative views for the sake of members of the public participating on the call, please do not make or use profane language when making public comments to the board. Thank you. And with that, I turn the meeting over to the committee chair.
Hi, hello everyone. So thank you for joining today's Dispensing Optician Committee meeting. Definitely it's via video conference, so excited for that. This is definitely going to allow us to have a much larger participation within the proceedings, and we definitely want to welcome a very robust discussion. And then just as a reminder that there will be room for public comment, and that will be in the chat, and I will call for the time for public comment as well. And we have a designated time on the agenda for public comment, so I will be asking for that over each agenda item. And today's meeting will be running till about 1 p.m. today. So with that, I'll call the meeting to order, and I'll now call roll. And we have Anna Watts.
I think you're on mute.
I think I heard you.
Hello?
Oh, now I can hear you, Anna.
Okay, I'm here.
I can see you.
Oh,
Visually.
I can't see me.
Yeah. Okay. And Bill Casella.
I'm here. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
And Mr. Chair, if I can just, our public and stakeholders who often pay attention to the movements of the Dispensing Optician Committee will notice that we have some members absent today. We were alerted by the governor's office after the posting of this meeting notice that the terms for Ruby Garcia and Khan Matu would not be reinstated. So we have enjoyed their participation in the committee. Thank them so very much for their service, and of course regret that they won't be continuing on the committee with us. And so we have, of course, our new chair, Adam Bentley, and on behalf of the president of the Board of Optometry, I want to say welcome and thank you. As far as staff, we want to say you have been such a great member of this committee, and we're so very excited for you to take up this leadership role of chair.
Awesome, thank you. And please forgive any hiccups, as this will be my first meeting leading. So any hiccups, I do apologize ahead of time. So second item on the agenda will be our room for public comment. So we'll now open the chat feature for members of the public to request time to speak on the items not agendized for today. So comments will not be read from the chat feature. So please type that you would like to speak, and then our facilitators, our moderators, will be able to open the mics in order of the request. And just I remind my fellow committee members that we may not comment on these items, but may indicate if staff should agendize this matter for a future meeting.
This is the moderator. I have opened up the question and answer panel for members of the public that wish to make a comment. If you're not seeing it in the bottom lower right of your screen, go ahead and click on the icon that looks like a person next to 3 lines. If you click on that, you should see the comment field in the lower right hand of your screen. Simply type, I would like to make a comment, and submit it to all panelists. I will then unmute members of the public in the order that they make their request, and you can make your comment. We'll give you a little bit of time to do that. This is the moderator. We have no requests for public comment coming in. Would you like me to close the question and answer panel?
Yes, please close that.
All right, I will do that. Thank you.
All right, with no public comment, we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 3, which will be the spectacle lens dispenser occupational analysis. So if the moderators can move Dr. Heidi Linzer up to a panelist. And first, thank you, Dr. Linzer, for joining us today. Would love to hear your presentation on the spectacle lens dispenser occupational analysis that we've been looking forward to for a while now, I feel like.
Good morning. This is Heidi Linzer, Chief of the Office of Professional Examination Services. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. I see my presentation is on your screen, so I'll go right ahead. The office, and let me see if I can advance the slide. Don't know how to advance the slide exactly.
This is the moderator. We'll make you the presenter, and then you'll have the power to move your slides along in just a moment.
Okay.
All right, this is a moderator. You've been made the presenter, Dr. Linzer, so you should be able to move the slides along. Usually it's to your left, there's a downward arrow that you can click on.
Yeah, where it says, see the little down arrow right below the 1?
Got it. Thank you. Okay, well, this is my first presentation through WebEx, so thank you for your patience. So the Office of Professional Examination Services works with the various boards and bureaus in DCA to make sure their exams are valid and meet psychometric standards. The mandate that we follow is Business and Professions Code Section 139. 139 requires that boards conduct an occupational analysis for each examination every 5 to 7 years, and that boards submit a report every year indicating the status of their occupational analysis and their examination development work. So the purpose of 139 is to make sure that boards and bureaus make sure their exams stay current and valid. So it also requires that part of that process is to do an occupational analysis every 5 to 7 years. So we've been working with the Optometry Board to make sure all their exams are updated. We worked on the Optometry examination. We worked on the contact lens dispenser examination, occupational analysis, and now we finished up the spectacle lens dispenser. So the next, the principles and then the standards that are listed here on your screen, they require that evidence of validity for test content must be based on a thorough and explicit description of the content domain of interest. So in order to develop a valid examination, we need to have a description of what we're trying to measure. We don't just go in a room and start writing test questions. We first have to describe the profession to make sure that what we're testing on a licensing exam are things that people need to know to be licensed. And for licensure, we're mostly focused on protecting the public. We're not so much focused on running a business as a lot of practitioners do, but more on protection of the public in terms of practicing in the profession. So our standards and guidelines require that we have this full description of the practice, and a close link between test content and job content must be established. And in order to do that, we have the input of subject matter experts. Subject matter experts are licensees who are active and practicing in the field. So all of the work that we do involves the work of the use of subject matter experts. So licensure examinations, looking at the big picture, as I said, the purpose of licensing is to identify individuals who can practice safely and competently from those who cannot. So exams, licensure exams, must be developed to provide a valid and reliable measure for doing this. And to be fair, when we're making decisions about who's legally allowed to practice, we must focus on entry-level knowledge and tasks that are, as I said, important for public protection. We need to ensure that the examinations protect consumers while not limiting access to occupations. It's a balance between those two goals. So we find that balance by ensuring that SMEs, subject matter experts, as I said, are involved in all phases of our work. This diagram shows what we call the cycle of examination development. These are all the steps that we do in order to develop a licensing exam, and these steps are not specific to OPES. These are for any examination, whether it be a national exam or a state exam. So the first step, as we said, is the occupational analysis, and that's how we determine what should be covered on a test. And we call those the critical entry-level tasks and knowledge that must be mastered to protect the public. And as I'm going to go through this, that will be a list of tasks that licensees must perform and the knowledge they need to do those tasks. So the next step in our cycle is once we have that list of tasks and knowledge, we develop an examination outline. And that's a blueprint for how do we put a test together. How much of the test should be devoted to different tasks and knowledge. So things that are done more frequently or things that are rated more important get more weight on a test. The next step is to write test questions. We have subject matter experts, and your national exam also should have subject matter experts come in and write the test questions, review the test questions, put exams together, and then also determine the passing score for those examinations. So the main purpose of an occupational analysis, as I said, provides a description of current practice. And this description is used to develop a legally defensible content outline for what should be tested on an examination. It also provides qualitative and quantitative data that can be used for other purposes. So it can be used to evaluate licensure requirements to ensure they're congruent with the entry-level competencies. Sometimes the licensure requirements were developed a long time ago, and the practice may have evolved, so that's a good check and balance between what are we asking people how are we asking people to qualify, and is that congruent with what they're doing on the job. It can also be used for training and curriculum requirements. So the OA can also help make distinctions between licensing classifications. If you have overlap, as you might have some overlap between what contact lens dispensers do and spectacle lens dispensers do and what dispensing opticians do, it can help to clarify that overlap. And it also improves transparency by providing specific exam information that candidates need to know in order to be licensed. So these are the basic steps in the process. We first started with conducting subject matter expert interviews and research on the profession. And then we developed a list of task and knowledge statements with the subject matter experts. And for the spectacle lens dispenser occupational analysis, we had a workshop to do that, and that workshop was in August of 2019. Then we developed, administered, and analyzed a survey. The survey asked licensees to review the tasks and rate how often they perform the tasks and how frequently they perform the tasks and how important the tasks are, and then ask them how important each of the knowledge statements were. Then we had another workshop to review the survey results with subject matter experts, and that workshop we had in November of 2019. And then the final result of that workshop was an examination outline that we developed that shows the weights of the different content areas. So we worked with the board staff to conduct this project. The board staff was responsible for recruiting the subject matter experts to participate in the project, and the board staff did an excellent job working with us to get the subject matter experts, and we were very pleased with the dedication and the input from the subject matter experts that we worked with. So, some details about the project. We surveyed all licensed spectacle lens dispensers. There were 2,728 that were invited to complete the online survey. In order to help increase get the word out, we sent survey invitations by email and also by mail. And the final sample size that we used for data analysis was 223 SLDs, or 8.2%. That might sound very low to you, but that's typical for these surveys, which we do for all the different boards and bureaus. Typical response rate is around 10%. So that's the nature of doing surveys nowadays. Okay, so in addition to asking about them to rate the task and knowledge, we also asked some demographic questions so we could get a description of who our respondents were. So we asked about their training and education, their experience, their work setting, where they work, and these provide a context for interpreting the results. So here's some of the demographic information. First thing we always ask is years licensed, and what's important to us, even though we get the response rate may look low, what's important to us is that we get representation from all different years licensed. So as you can see here, it's pretty balanced and we're most interested in the 0 to 5 years. So we had 36% of our respondents who were licensed 0 to 5 years. That makes sure we get that entry level perspective. And then we had 15% 6 to 10 years, 19% 11 to 20 years, and 30% more than 20 years. So it's very balanced, and we like to see that. In previous, before we used SurveyMonkey to survey everyone, we used to select a specialized sample and try to oversample the entry level to make sure that we got enough. But now we're just surveying everyone, and we're really happy when we get a good enough response from the entry. So this graphic shows their primary work setting. And another thing we just like to see is that we get a variety of work settings in our results. And so you can see that most of the people who responded to the survey worked in big box stores. And then second was national chain optical stores, and then independent optical stores. And then the others were very slightly lower, very lower. This next slide shows the number of registered SLDs working at a facility. So most facilities had 1 to 3 people working in their facility. Next slide, we asked number of non-registered SLDs, because we know the board is interested in this type of information. And we see that there was 1 to 3 non-registered SLDs was the most common, was 49% responded with that information. This slide shows that about 54% of the respondents received their training on the job, 26% completed a vocational program, 22% hold an associate's degree, 24% hold a bachelor's degree, and few held master's and doctoral degrees. Now remember, this is just our sample. This does not mean this is totally representative of the entire population. This is, this data is dependent on the people who completed the survey. Another thing that's not on the slide here is that you might be interested in is that we asked what other licenses the SLDs held, and 72% indicated that they held a dispensing optician license, and 28% indicated that they held a contact lens dispensing license. And there's some more data in the report. There's more demographic data. This slide just shows that we had representation from all areas of California. That's another thing that we look at. We want to make sure that we've covered all of California in our responses. So back to the most important, which was the actual tasks and knowledge. So as I said to you, the tasks were rated on how often they were performed. So we call this a frequency scale. And so the respondents were asked, how often do you perform this task in your current work? And they were asked to rate it from 0 to 5. 0 means I don't perform this task, and 5 was very often. And there were anchors in between that, as somewhat and less and more often. The importance scale was how important is this task? And again, they could rate it from not important to critically important. For the knowledges, those were just rated on importance. It doesn't apply to my work, or it is critically important. So we develop a criticality index value for each of the tasks. Let me go back to the previous slide. So what we do with this data, when we get the data back, we develop a criticality index value for each of the tasks and knowledge. So for each respondent, we multiply the frequency rating times the importance rating for each task, and then we calculate the average of those values across all respondents. And in other words, what we're trying to say is we both frequency and importance contribute to the criticality index. And so therefore, as I said before, tasks that are very important but performed less frequently are still considered critical for entry-level practice. And then tasks that are performed very frequently but considered less important are also considered critical. So both of those things are important, as you can imagine, in practice. Things you do every day, we want to make sure that licensees are competent in those. And then things you may do less often but are very, very important, we want to make sure to assess competency in those as well. And for knowledge, the criticality index is simply the mean importance rating. So in that final occupational analysis workshop that we had in November, we had the SMEs review the data, and they look at the criticality ratings for all the tasks and knowledge. And the reason we have a group of SMEs make these final determinations is that, as you saw, the survey data we may have a low response rate. We want to make sure that the data makes sense to actual licensees. So we have SMEs look at the data, make sure it makes sense, and they get to make the final determination based on the data. So they identify critical tasks and knowledge. So as they were looking at the task and knowledge ratings, we had one content area that we called vision pretest. In the first occupational analysis meeting, we had a discussion about whether to include these tasks as part of the work of spectacle lens dispensers. And these were tasks related to conducting a vision pretest. And we had 7 tasks in there, and there was discussion about whether spectacle lens dispensers were doing this or not. And the way we handle things like this for occupational analyses is we include the information on the survey with the knowledge that if the survey data comes back that not a lot of people are doing it, we understand that that may drop out of the examination outline. So when we looked at the results of those task and knowledge ratings, they were low. They were low in frequency and low in importance. So we had a discussion with the SMEs in this workshop, and the consensus was that they should be deleted from the examination outline. That doesn't mean that they're not practiced by some people. It just means they were rated as less critical than other tasks due to the low frequency and importance ratings. So we looked at all the data. We made some adjustments. We moved some other tasks into the first content area that were with those vision pretests. We had a content area for that. We dropped it. And so that's the point of this last workshop, is to review all the data, make data-driven decisions, and come up with a final examination outline. They also made sure that every task was linked with the knowledge, and every knowledge was related to a task. So the final content areas and their weights are shown here. We had 6 content areas. You can see the weights. And I'm going to read you, we also developed a brief description of each area. And these descriptions are important for outside people and anyone wanting to understand what an occupation, what is involved in their occupation. So we like to present that in the report. So we have a description of each content area. So a layperson can look at this and say, what do SLDs do? Oh, here's a nice description. So prescription assessment, what does that mean? That means candidates are assessed on the knowledge of interpreting patient spectacle lens prescriptions, neutralizing current eyewear, prescription requirements, and conditions for referral of patients to medical professionals. Content area 2 is called eyewear selection and ordering, and this assesses a candidate's knowledge of assisting patients with frame and lens selection based on patient lifestyle, pre-fitting spectacle frames, and taking patient measurements. Content area 3 is called manufacturing. That assesses a candidate's knowledge of spectacle lens manufacturing, including frame measurements, calculating decentration, identifying optical centers, and mounting lenses into frames. Content area 4 is called quality control, and that assesses a candidate's knowledge of procedures for verifying that finished eyewear matches patient prescription and order specifications, is aligned and free from defects, and meets ANSI standards. Content area 5 is called dispensing, and that assesses candidates' knowledge of adjusting and repairing spectacle frames, educating patients on eyewear use, care and warranty, and troubleshooting patient concerns. And area 6 is advertising and supervising, and that assesses knowledge of laws and regulations related to advertising and supervising trainings. So that is my report on the SLD occupational analysis. Let me give you a little bit of background in, because you have a national exam. So part of BMP 139, as I said, we need to do an occupational analysis on every occupation that is under DCA. Even though we don't develop a California examination for SLD, we still need to do an occupational analysis that is California specific. So that's what we did. We tried to describe the profession of what California licensees do. One thing we're going to do with that, the results of that, is to review the national examination against that occupational analysis, and as this slide says, against testing industry standards. So because you use a national examination, another part of BMP 139 requires that we make sure that that national examination is developed in accordance with testing industry standards. So we're in the process of doing that now. We're doing that with the contact lens registry examination and the National Opticianry Competency Examination. So we're reviewing both of those against testing industry standards and against our occupational analyses to make sure that they test what California licensees do on the job. So we also, I just finished that for optometry. So we'll have some reports ready for your board very soon, summarizing these findings and recommendations. So that's all I have, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah. So first, thank you, Dr. Linser, for that. We appreciate it. Obviously, it's very insightful. So I did just want to open this up as well for any of the committee members. If you have any questions at all, please. Anna?
I don't have any questions.
Bill?
Oh, hi. Thank you for the presentation. My question is actually for my colleagues on the board. In terms of the content area, there were like six critical areas: prescription assessment, eyewear selection, manufacturing, quality control, etc. I'm wondering if, in your experience, like if you look at that, you'd say, "Oh yeah, that's like what I do." Is that like a, do you think that's representative? Obviously, the sample of the two of you isn't scientific, but I was just curious.
Dr. Linser, do you mind putting that slide back up on the screen?
Sure.
And Bill, I can speak up first. Out of these 6, I think these 6 categories are a great representation of like the day in the life of an optician. As far as the weight, I was actually kind of surprised by that, because when I think of what is important when you think of consumer protection, I think the most important thing that kind of jumps out here is quality control. Like, what are we delivering to the consumer? And for that to be weighted lower than selecting the eyewear, I think just as far as the weight goes, I found that interesting versus like, so obviously, like, I think, quality control is definitely a huge thing. Prescription assessment, I feel, is a very important part, understanding what the doctor is prescribing. So I think those two kind of surprised me by being weighted a little bit lower. I'll let Anna speak to that as well. She has comments.
Yeah, thanks. That kind of puts it in context. But my sense is, looking at the big 6 there, that that makes sense. So, thank you.
Of course. Okay.
Mr. Chair, might I ask a question?
I'm so sorry.
Might I ask a question?
Of course.
This is Shar Murphy, Executive Officer. I'm just wondering, Dr. Linser, what you see as the timeline for results of those exam comparisons?
You mean our reports that we're working on? That's what you mean, Shar? Okay. Yes. The optometry report is done and with our editor. So it should be a couple more weeks and you'll have that. And the other report is, okay, also almost done. I have tasked my staff. We have a lot of reports that we're trying to finish by the end of this fiscal year. So we're on track.
Oh, wow. Wow, wonderful. I had expected a longer timeline. Thank you.
Okay. Can I address the previous comments?
Yes, please.
Oh, so just your comments. Thank you very much. It's good to hear your interest in the breakdown of the weight. So I just wanted to give you some information about how those weights are determined, or what things go into that. As one is the ratings of the frequency and importance, but another factor is how many tasks and knowledge we have in each area. So in terms of doing area 2, we have a lot more tasks and knowledge in that area, so that gives it more weight. And those can be, if we were to develop a California-specific exam for you, we would, we might have another discussion about these if we were going to actually develop an examination. But these were based on the data and on the SME's evaluation. And so there were more tasks in those areas than there was in quality control. Not that quality control is less important.
Okay, thanks for sharing. Okay, are there any other comments from the committee or staff? Awesome, then now I will open it up to any members of the public who'd like to make a comment. We will open up the chat.
This is the moderator. I've gone ahead and opened up the question and answer panel. For those of you that are members of the public that would like to make a comment, please enter "I would like to make a comment" and submit it to all panelists using the panel in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. If you do not see the panel, go ahead and go to the middle of your screen and click on the outline of a person next to 3 lines. Then you should see it to the right. We'll go ahead and pause for just a moment to give you a chance to do that. Thank you. And this is the moderator. I've gone ahead and given presenter capabilities back to the co-moderator so she can share the screen that provides instructions for making public comment. This is the moderator. No members of the public are requesting public comment. Mr. Chair, would you like me to close the question and answer panel?
Yes, please.
All right, I will do that. Thank you.
All right. So now we'll move on to agenda. Oh, actually, sorry. Thank you yet again, Dr. Linser. We, appreciate you and your team's work on the presentation. So thank you again. And then moving on to agenda item 4A, we'll be going into the Opticianry licensing program updates. So if the moderators can move Natalie Leeper up to panelist. And Ms. Leeper, please, you can begin your report on the licensing statistics.
Hello, everyone. This is Natalia. First thing off with our licensing statistic is applications are currently processing per normal, despite the state of the world right now. Keeps steady at 4 to 6 week processing time with an application with no deficiencies. There has been some issue with making sure that all of our applicants are able to do live scans since a lot of the locations are closed. However, the Department of Justice has been very helpful and provided us a list of open locations, which we have provided to applicants. We are not penalizing them if they don't want to go get their live scans done. We're basically saying, okay, that's fine, we could leave your application on hold until you can feel safe enough to go to a location. Some other things that we have made implement changes into Breeze. For many, many years, the applications on Breeze were asked if you were currently employed with a registered dispensing optician for spectacle lens and contact lens dispensers. That has been removed. That is no longer a requirement. Instead, it asks if you have passed the required ABO or NCLE exam, which removes that barrier for licensure. There has been some updates regarding the exams themselves. ABO has been in contact with us and has let us know that the May exam was canceled to a point. It was open at a limited availability. When I looked at the number of passers that we received, it was about a third of what we normally receive for May. And as far as I know, they will be continuing testing through June and July as well. There has been no update on what the August exam will look like, but people are still testing for their ABO and NCLE exams. It's just looks a little different this time. And that is the end of the licensing update. Were there any questions?
Chair, if I can just add to Natalia's report. One, in saying that Natalia has taken on such great responsibility with our organization, and the fact that she is keeping our timelines at 4 to 6 weeks while also helping to maintain the initial applications for optometry licensure as well is just amazing. Natalia is definitely at this point keeping our board running, and we sincerely appreciate all of her effort. Wanted to make sure that we let folks understand that the change to the application came from Natalia's experience with licensees, and that there's a need to have your license, your registration often before gaining employment. And so the requirement on the application to state an employer was a clear barrier to registration, and for those folks who then were required to have it before being accepted by an RDO. So we were very grateful for Natalia and her understanding that that was an issue for registrants and working with Breeze to fix that. There was an additional point, but I think I'll just just defer and let committee members ask questions at this point.
I have no questions.
I do not either. Anna?
I do not have any questions, but I do think that it looks really good compared to years ago. So it came a long way. So great job.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
definitely think that was a barrier having the employer, so it's nice that that is removed. Awesome. So at this time, I'll open it up to members of the public. If there are any comments, we can open up the chat feature again.
This is the moderator. I am in the process of opening the Q&A panel. So the question and answer panel is now available. If you'd like to make a public comment, please go to the lower right-hand corner of your screen and type, "I would like to make a comment." Submit it to all panelists, and I will unmute you in the order of your request. We have instructions on the screen, and I will give you a few minutes. All right, so we have a Michelle Hoff that would like to make a public comment. So Michelle, hold on a moment. I will find you and unmute you. Michelle, you've been unmuted. You have 2 minutes to make your comment. Michelle, we can't hear you. All right, you might need to go to the top of your screen and click on communication and select audio options and do a call in. All right. Michelle, would you like to try that again? All right, so we're not hearing you at this time. You might need to try to call in for your audio. I'll go ahead and mute you. So this is the moderator, and Mr. Chair, we have no other request for public comment except Michelle Hoff, and unfortunately, it doesn't appear that she has access to sound.
Okay. Okay. Then we will move on to.
Okay.
We can go ahead and close the chat feature then.
I will do that. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll move on to agenda item number 4. Oh, I'm sorry. 4B. I skipped over there. So we're going to go do an update with our optician reinforcement program. The moderators can move Alexander Juarez to panelist. Mr. Juarez, you can please give us an update on the enforcement statistics.
Thanks, Adam. Good morning. Don't skip over me just yet. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. So enforcement for Q3 of the 2019-2020 fiscal year had a total of 22 cases, new cases, and we closed 33 cases with no action. We had 5 cases pending with the Attorney General's office and processed 2 disciplinary orders. And just to give you a heads up, the Q3 is January to March. We don't have a clear indication just yet of how the lockdown, the quarantine has affected these enforcement numbers, we may not have that until the next meeting. But I do have some high level numbers to share with you just after these Q3 numbers. So bear with me. The majority of the cases that were received in the opticianry program were criminal conviction cases at 50%. The second largest complaint type was for unlicensed and unregistered cases at 23%. And the remaining cases were for unprofessional conduct and non-jurisdictional cases at 18 and 9%. 60% of the cases were closed within 1 year of the receipt of the initial case. So that looks okay there. Let's see here. The 2 disciplinary and administrative actions included, oh, I lost my place here. One case for Mr. Martin Dawson, and the second being for Miss Angelica Sanford. And the links for those cases are on the memo in case you want a little more description on those. And hopefully I can answer any questions you may have.
Alex, or possibly Cherie, sorry, this is Shar Murphy, Executive Officer. Could one of you remind us of the ideal timelines for case closure within DCA? We know that in the last 5 years, there's been a very clear movement on the part of DCA to ascertain best practices and then help boards to decrease timelines in order to get within those. Alex or Cherie, if you could remind us what those timelines are.
This is Cherie.
Cherie, your audio is quite distorted.
Take action, they should be closed within 90 days of receipt.
I apologize, Mr. Chair. We're just trying to get answers from our Assistant Executive Officer. All right, we'll continue to try to communicate with her by chat and see if we can get clarity on the answers. But I wanted to, there we go, thank you. So I wanted to note that the DCA best practices goal for closure of cases where there is action is 2 years. So I want to note that we are half that timeline for our standard, our timeline for cases where we do take action. Where action is not taken, then the goal is 90 days. So just want to note that we are clearly within those best practice timelines, and just congratulate staff, Alex, on meeting those and exceeding those best practice rates.
And then just one more thing to add on that. I got some recent stats this morning for Q4 between April and then just recently, and it looks like we've received, let me pull it up here. Looks like we've received, sorry, I'm missing my dual monitors right now. Here we go. So it looks like we received 19 new cases for the opticianry program, and we've closed 14 so far, and that's since April 1st. So it looks like we're on par, at least with the Q3 stats with how many cases we're getting. So no slowdown in case intake from the quarantine or the lockdown just yet.
Awesome, thank you. And I'll go to any questions from the committee. Bill, you guys see you unmuted.
Hi, this is Bill. Thanks for the report, and I'm particularly thankful for those links to the disciplinary cases to help put into context what all of these regulations and all of the work we do are about. So thank you. That's it.
Thanks.
Anna, did you have any questions or comments? Was it a no?
No questions.
Okay. I thought I heard a yes. I did have one quick question, just for my own clarity, Alex. I was curious if you could help me understand, whenever we had 33 cases closed with no action, obviously we did not take any action, I can assume that, but what typically leads to a case not ending in any action from our end?
So there could be a number of things, and maybe sure you can help me out with anything that I may miss. But for example, if we get a case in for like a subsequent arrest, we find a rap sheet, a hit that someone got arrested recently. If that person hasn't gone through the whole court process, then we'll open a case for a subsequent arrest, and then it'll be closed initially, awaiting on the criminal disposition. So that's one way you'll see a number pop up for a case closure in that quarter.
Alex, may I just expound upon that? So in opening the subsequent arrest notification step, if the crime is of such a nature that we would need to take a suspension action or something else, we need to interrupt practice of that registrant, then it's important that we open that case, we evaluate the documents available to us in the arrest report, and then close if there isn't a situation in which the potential criminal action is egregious or particularly pertaining to work.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, then I'll open it up to any public comment now. We can open the chat.
Oh, it's Bill. I have a follow-up on that. So in the classic DUI on the weekend type of case, is that then closed until the
Typically, yes. I can't recall a situation where we would do anything other than that, but it is closely monitored, and we keep track of the court case.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This is the moderator. Per the request of the chair, I have opened up the question and answer panel. So for any members of the public that would like to make a comment, please type, I would like to make a comment, and submit it to all panelists. Instructions are on the screen, and if you're not seeing the panel, go ahead to the bottom of your screen and click on the icon of a person next to 3 lines. Then you should see the panel to your right. We'll give you a few moments. This is the moderator, Mr. Chair, and no members of the public are seeking to make a comment. Would you like me to close the question and answer panel?
I do see the previous person, Michelle, requesting to make a comment.
Right, that was for the first item. We can try unmuting her again if you'd like. Would you like me to do that?
Yes, let's give it a try.
Okay. All right, Michelle, I have unmuted you. Would you like to see if you can talk and we can hear you? And Michelle, if you are accessing audio through your phone, you might have to unmute your phone and your computer. All right, so it looks like she still is unable to
Okay.
speak. Right.
Apologies. Okay, we'll go ahead and close and move on to the next agenda item.
All right.
Okay, so next we'll go ahead and release Alex from panelists, and we'll go on to the Optometry Fund condition. And Ms. Murphy is going to be subbing for the budget office today. So please, Ms. Murphy, begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll have our committee members and members of the public refer to the item number 4, C2 expenditures. I'll start there. You're able to see our expenditures throughout this fiscal year and then projections to year end, so the next 2 weeks. We are happy that despite budget pressures prior to the stay-at-home order, and then of course then the needed cuts within spending in order to combat inequity of profits within the department. We are happy that we are still reverting $12,000 on schedule to revert $12,000 back to our rainy day fund for the board. So we have a 2% surplus of $12,000, $12,446 that will be placed into essentially our savings account. So we've had a lot of discussion within the optometry board about how our budgeting works. And so just want to remind folks that we were able to realize this savings. It will go into our savings account. And if we find that there is a need for additional expenditure of those funds, then we would go through the budget change proposal process. We're beginning that now. We don't have any budget change proposals on deck for the Dispensing Optician Committee or the RDO fund this year. But that gives us an opportunity to look into special projects. If at some point we did want to create a state-specific exam, then we would request the expenditure of our rainy day fund through the agency, and then also Department of Finance and the governor's office. So we're excited to keep that money in reserves, know that we're able to keep our spending in line, but also remind folks that it's not a fund that we can simply dip into if we say want to reward Natalia for all of her great work. So that does require the budget change proposal process. And so then if we can go to item 4C1, the fund condition. So this is a reporting of our savings account. So this is where we see the monies we've been able to bring into that savings account each year. You'll see here 1920, we have around 10 that we're able to reinvest, always some small expenditure that comes up for a few $100s here or there at the end of the fiscal year. But we are certainly within the mandated number of months for solvency within our rainy day fund. We do not foresee that there would be a need for fee increases or other adjustments to the monies which we bring in through licensure. We have a healthy fund and continue to run on budget. Are there any questions?
I do have a quick question. With obviously the current climate and then the current executive orders of staying at home, shelter in place, based on what we typically see with new licensees, like the money we're able to generate from new licensees, I'm sure you weren't prepared because this is a new question, but with like Q1 or like within each quarter, what is our typical revenue from new licensees? And if we are to see like a dip in new licensees and here in Q4, is there like an expected, we might see like a drop of this much or any expected loss for this quarter based on our average new licensee revenue?
That certainly is something that we've been looking at, and that I can speak to generally, and then of course provide some statistics to the committee after we're here today. I'll work with budgets to pull those. So we didn't see a substantial decrease, as we said, or as Natalia said during the licensing. Of course, we know that testing has been shifting out. So we don't foresee that we will have particular issues in budgeting, but we are going to see our revenues, I think, sort of spreading out as more folks move from that May date to, again, the May date, and then usually these the ABO and CLE is administered quarterly. So they've continued, of course, to do examination in July, and we'll do that in June, and then in July, and then we'll have folks that are moving to that August date. So I think we'll see sort of monies coming in different rounds from what we usually see. But I think that we're in a fine budget state to continue our monthly spending in the way that we do, even though we know that things will sort of trickle out a little bit. And also too, with our state budgeting process oh goodness, I'm completely blanking on the name of the system right now. But we also, of course, our budgeting numbers, everything is kind of working quarter by quarter. So we really won't begin to look at budgeting numbers for Q1 of 2020 until the end of Q1 of 2020. So I don't anticipate that we'll see significant issues with operating funds or anything of that sort. But we, of course, will go in and take a look at numbers, and we can give you some statistics on what our, what our revenues have been over these last few months of stay-at-home order.
Thanks. And then Bill, do you have any comments?
Yeah, kind of a related follow-up. You know, we it seems there's like a big need for a budget revision from what the governor had initially proposed earlier in the year, and I'm wondering if the numbers on our sheet here like remain accurate, or do we expect any like immediate concerns from the the change in the kind of state's budget situation right now?
So we are, of course, still in the middle of that process. Earlier this week, the legislature passed a balanced budget, and sent that to the governor's desk. You may have heard in, thank you, fiscal, much appreciated. As we've moved to fiscal, our numbers are a little slower than usual. We are still in the middle of that budget process, and there has been, extensive negotiation between the legislature and the governor, and their approach to the budget is different. Their approach very much offsets some of the costs that the governor announced in his May revise. And so if that budget is agreed to, then we will be less likely to have, the 5% or 10% cuts across budgets that we were warned about with the governor's May revise. So we'll see how things move in, the next few weeks as the governor determines whether or not he's going to sign that budget. And then what other kind of negotiations continue. We are, of course, watching, and our rank and file employees on the board are, of course, watching with a lot of personal interest as to whether or not there's going to be a reduction in salaries of 10% across the board, as there had been warned with the May revise. And then we at DCA were also told that our special funds, of course, could be subject to borrowing in order to allow for general fund spending. So there are several boards whose, fund condition sheets are in even greater shape than ours, and they have committed to general fund loans that will allow the state to continue to spend within the next fiscal year. And there is, of course, still the possibility that they could come to us asking for that same sort of loan. It's structured very clearly as to when payback would be. It's a process that we've gone through before and received payback of those funds. So right now things are still up in the air. Bill, I think best thing to say that the legislature is pushing so that we're not required to make those cuts. but we'll see what the governor's, decision is on the budget, and how that might come down to us. And then, of course, whether or not there's a need for additional loans from special funds. As a reminder to everyone, our committee, as well as the public and stakeholders who are listening today, that we, of course, generate all of our own fees through the registration process, that, there is very much an understanding that DCA is a revenue-generating arm of the state government, that we help professionals, gain licensure and then be active parts of the economy. So that is, of course, considered as the budget situation is worked out. But we don't foresee immediate issues.
Got it.
It was quite a long-winded answer. Let me know if I didn't answer your question, Bill.
No, you did. Thank you. And I recall from my time on the board of optometry after the last budget crisis, our rainy day fund was rated for $1 million, and rewarding our diligent savings. But as Shar said, it was ultimately repaid. So it really it worked, kind of, given the crisis the state was in. So I'm less worried about it now, having seen it work. I thought we would never see that money again when it happened the first time. So thank you.
Of course. And I should also add, too, that as part of the governor's task force for contact tracing, not within the opticianry budget, but within the optometry budget, we have released an AGPA staffer to that contracting effort who actually just this week started training. So that staffer will still be paid through the optometry fund, but they will work full-time for the contact tracing project. So we are happy to help the state in that way, in both, disease control and that kind of gift of full-time personnel in order to continue contact tracing and to help the government help the overall state budget in its current state.
A quick question to the professional members: Have you heard from colleagues or anything, like have contact tracers contacted your colleagues? Because it seems to me I work the same for optometry, but obviously there's you're in close proximity to members of the public on a regular basis. That I'm just wondering. Do you have any experience with that?
What was I'm sorry, I was understanding the question.
Yeah, so the question is, in the general sense, like, have you heard of, from colleagues or people in your practice where it's like, oh my gosh, I got a call from a contact tracer and, I saw 3 positive patients last week, and that sort of thing?
My organization is nationwide. And then as far as colleagues, I haven't yet heard anything like that. And I know that there've been a lot of the way that a lot of optical stores have either been open the entire time, because here in San Francisco we have optical shops that have been open through the entire crisis, and also some that have decided to close down. But I have not heard firsthand. But I know.
And you don't sense that in those shops that have been open, it's not like within your organization, it's like, oh my gosh, nationwide, 10% of our staff is tested positive, or that sort of thing. It's not like an immediate, well.
No.
Okay. All right. Just curious. Thank you.
Well, good question for right now. Hot topic. Awesome. Well, Anna, do you have any comments or questions?
No, I was just going to say, I personally haven't been in contact and I haven't heard anything either. I just do notice that a lot of the vendors have been trying to help a lot of the practices by offering free face shields, especially for those who are in close contact with any patients. And if they remain open, that's kind of been their safety measures, but nothing personal.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So next, just wanted to, again, open it up to the public, quick Q&A chat, if any public comment or questions.
All right, this is the moderator, and I have opened up the Q&A panel. If you would like to make a public comment, please type, I would like to make a comment in the Q&A field and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying directions for how to do that. If you're not seeing the panel, go ahead and click on the icon of a person next to 3 lines at the bottom of your screen, and you should see it to the right. We'll go ahead and give you a few minutes to do that.
I think we're safe to close the chat.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I will do that.
Okay, going into agenda item number 5, we will call for approval of the minutes from our meeting in January 30th, 2020. So we have one set of minutes to review. And does anyone at this time have or feel that the minutes cannot be approved?
This is Bill. I have, I guess, a technical question. When we, on actions that we're taking, like approving the minutes, do those require 3 votes or just a majority of the quorum? Meaning, in this case, it would be 2, since, that would then be a majority. I'm just curious. I don't think it'll weigh too much on this non-controversial item, but and then the related question is, does the member from the Board of Optometry have to be the SLD or the dispensing the professional representative from this regulated community that sits on the Board of Optometry, or could anybody from the board be the member on this committee? In which case, we might ask the board to temporarily appoint any member, just so we have a 4th member, and it makes it easier for us to do our business.
Hi, this is Will McGuire. I'm the new board counsel, actually, and this is my first DOC committee meeting, so thank you for having me, and hope I can help answer these type of questions. As to the first question, yeah, as far as once we have a quorum established of 3 out of 5 total members, which we have, any vote, any motion only needs a majority of the quorum to pass, so 2 out of 3 in this case. To answer that question, I don't know if this was part of your question, but sometimes it is. This question is asked, so I'll answer it as well. If you're thinking of abstaining from a vote on something like minutes, perhaps because you weren't at the previous meeting that we're approving. I don't know if that applies here, but if it does, you don't have to recuse yourself rather, or abstain. You can, it's your option, but what you're approving essentially is that you've reviewed the minutes and you don't have any corrections, or you're satisfied with, that they accurately represent what happened to the best of your knowledge. So you're not required to abstain simply if you didn't attend. As to the last part of your question, I believe if I'm understanding correctly, you're asking, does the member of the board who eventually will be appointed by the board to serve on this committee, do they need to be a particular profession? And I believe the answer is no. I will confirm that, but unless I'm missing something, I don't believe it's pertinent to this discussion item. Is that correct?
Oh, I see your point on that last point. That's correct. Maybe I'll save it for the end then. But you otherwise answered my question on the 2 votes carrying the day.
Okay, thanks. I was just going to follow up as I'm reading here the B and P code 3020. It says the filling of vacancies on the committee shall be made by the board upon recommendations by the committee. I don't see the requirement that it has to be a particular qualified board member. Just you guys can recommend which board member you would like to be appointed, and then the board will vote on that at a subsequent meeting.
Right, and that was, that organic statute is, interesting because originally the board appointed the members of the committee, but now, as terms have expired and so forth, the governor will appoint the committee members, but the board still designate which member of the board serves on the committee as their representative, essentially.
Yeah.
Will, might I? So we do need to do an official action of this committee to recommend who that board member would be. It's our intention today during the future agenda items to talk with the committee about how they'd like to approach that. Unfortunately, with the notification that we received, we weren't able to add that item to this agenda. But I want to make sure that we don't get too far afield from the minutes, and also to let Mr. Costello know that we will we'll discuss this more in today's agenda, and then it will likely be staff's recommendation to call a special meeting for that discussion so as to have a recommendation to the board more swiftly.
Got it. I move we approve the minutes.
Thank you. Do I get hear a second? Thank you, Anna. And then we'll go now to public comment. Any public comment on the minutes? We'll open up the Q&A chat.
This is the moderator. I am opening up the Q&A chat. It is now open. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment at this time, please type, "I would like to make a comment," and submit it to all panelists at the bottom lower right of your screen. We're displaying instructions right now, and if you do not see the Q&A panel, go ahead and click on the icon of a person next to 3 lines at the bottom middle of your screen, and you should see it to your right. It will go ahead and give you a couple minutes. All right, this is the moderator, and no one is requesting to make a comment.
All right, thank you. Please close.
All right, I will do that.
All right, so now that there are no public comments, we'll now have our vote. So Anna? I didn't hear. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I.
Okay. I was like, I can see that you're saying I.
Technology is not my friend right now.
And Bill?
Aye.
I as well. Okay. Now we'll move on to discussion. Item number 6, which is discussion of ABO pass rate comparison. So moderators, if you're able to move Natalie Leeper to panelist, and then Natalie, please begin presenting on the ABO pass rate.
Hello, committee members. This is Natalia again. If any of you recall, in January, we brought to you what the pass rate was for California for the ABO and NCLA exam, which was 48%. You had asked specifically to see what that comparison was to other states who take the ABO exam. And this is my findings when I did the research into other states who both are licensed and are not licensed. On average, I found that states who were licensed did have better passing rates. The only exceptions to that were California and Hawaii. And on the other side, the exception for an unlicensed state who had a really good passing rate was Texas. On average, the passing rates that were high were at least 60% passing rate. And they were licensed states who had education and apprenticeships of some sort. The time for both education and the apprenticeships varied. Normally, it was about 2 years of education, about 1 year of apprenticeship, or the equivalent there of hours. Make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Very few states that were licensed had slightly lower passing rates, and it was discovered. I remembered that sometimes ABO does special exams for certain states. So states like Florida have their own ABO exam, so their passing rates are probably a little lower because they have a little more information that their licensees need to know. So the reason I thought this was very important is it brings up the concerns this committee has brought up over time for the need for education and apprenticeship. That concludes the thought.
Thanks, Natalie, for sharing. I just thought what was really interesting from this finding was just to compare, because California, as a reminder for everyone listening, does not have educational requirements to become a registered optician other than passing the ABO exam. Comparable states that are licensed with no formal education, as in like a college program or some type of formal educational program that a apprentice or someone learning to become an optician would have to go through. I noticed that like some comparable states like Kentucky, Arizona, Tennessee, and Ohio were they don't require, well, actually Kentucky, they don't require formal education, but they require an apprenticeship. So someone has to work on the job for at least either probably averaging about 2 years. So someone has to have on-the-job experience for 2 years. So examples, Kentucky, Arizona, Tennessee, and Ohio, their ABO pass rate was between 50 to 60. So averaging probably like in the mid 50s. So I found that based on like adding an apprenticeship and that experience, that it didn't really boost the percentage of pass rates that much higher. Given that like, you know, California is definitely a lot lower. But I would love to hear, Bill and Anna, your all's interpretation of the results and your thoughts.
No, this is Bill. Yeah, so it's interesting. Like I'm wondering about these, like the unlicensed states. You know, Texas is particularly interesting. With a high passage rate but no license, and I didn't see if they had an education requirement or an apprentice requirement.
Neither.
Right, and so I assume just anybody can go and start doing the work if they wanted to. Like who? It sounds like no test is required in that state. There's nothing you have to do, but people are taking the test. I guess so they can hang a cert. I mean, obviously it's prudent to know what you're doing, but they want to hang the certificate or whatever. But like that seems to me maybe it's an outlier, but you know, you look at you know, some of these other places with no apprenticeship and no education, like Michigan, you know, where there's more than just a few people taking the test, where they are getting better, you know, better results. So it kind of goes to your point. I'm not sure that those requirements push up the score, but you know, obviously, you know, whether you're studying for the SAT or the LSAT or a bar exam or whatever, there are people that can teach you to take a test and pass and do well in. And so, you know, I don't know what,
well, then I think like
you know,
another,
what it means. And then the idea of this, if our study results in, oh, we're going to have California-specific questions, then is that going to bring the pass rate down? Or maybe people realize they have to read a pamphlet or something before they take the test, and they'll do better. I don't know.
Yeah, I think one state that really jumps out to me is Ohio. Ohio doesn't have any type of formal education requirements, yet they had, I think, the third highest test taking, but also they were scoring 63. So, and as Natalie brought up, the ABO does cater exams to different states. And I'm curious if Ohio has a specific exam that's catered to Ohio, and is that why they're seeing higher success? And then another thing I was looking into is, thinking about is, how long have you been, like in states like we were talking about, Bill, if let's say like I just literally walked off the street, sat for this exam, how many of these people actually have experience? Like, you know, I've been actually working for 3 years, finally decided to take my test, versus I've been working 3 months trying to take this test as well. So I'm also kind of curious what kind of experience the test takers have to really gauge.
Right. Just because there's no apprenticeship requirement doesn't mean that test takers aren't experienced in doing the craft.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. The other thing, when this first came up, when we very first established the committee, or when it was first established at our very first meeting, I think this was an issue. And one of the questions was, well, what's on the test? Is there stuff on there that just people in California would never even contemplate or do?
Mm-hmm.
And so they just miss those questions because it's like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think
something I never thought of.
Yeah. Well, one great example is anatomy. I'm not really, you know, as an optician day to day, I'm not really focusing on anatomy. I think that's just one example. So it's also the question of just review, and that's why I'm excited for the occupational analysis, kind of reviewing the test itself, is to say,
mm-hmm.
is it the test taker or is it the test, and kind of getting a better understanding of that.
Adam, just a comment. I went ahead and I looked at Ohio, and they do require either a 2-year degree in optical or the apprenticeship, and they do not have a specific exam.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anna, did you have any comments or thoughts on this?
Yeah, actually, I think I remember 3 years back we talked about all of this, and back then I remember when there was a huge push for getting everyone licensed. I recall a lot of people failing. I knew people who have been in the field for 13 plus years. A lot of them, they admitted, you know, we just wanted to take the exam. We didn't study for it. We figured pertain to what we do on an everyday basis. And they failed, and a lot of them failed more than 3 times. Mainly because what I recalled when I took the test was a lot of it did not pertain to what you actually did in a work environment. However, had you studied and learned all of the concepts and applied the education to your everyday job, it would have made you a better optician. Because before, I didn't know what prism was. I didn't understand a lot of the foundation of ophthalmics. And for me, I only knew the sales side, and which kind of made it feel like, oh, this is more retail. However, when I started studying the ABO, all the different books and everything, I felt that it helped me to understand why it was so important to troubleshoot and understand instrumentation and things like that. I recall a lot of people who did have the idea that, oh, if we just skim through the education, we can just go and get our license. And so many of them failed, and I would say 1 out of 5 would be lucky and they pass. But that's just my own experience. I've seen it on both sides of retail and in a hospital environment and in private practice. In private practice, a lot of the opticians there, they're not licensed, and they even say, well, we don't understand a lot of the basics, but we wish we did, and we wish there was more of a push for educating and getting licensing in that aspect, as well in the hospital realm, because it's about filling orders in a hospital environment, and the doctors kind of just tell you what to do, and that's it. So I guess it depends on where you work, but I know there are other places, like at Walmart, for example, that's where I had learned everything. I was not licensed for, I don't even remember, 3 years at least. And during that time, I knew lenses, and I knew whatever the lens benefits were, but I didn't understand, like what you said, anatomy, or I didn't understand the purpose of the different instruments. I was just kind of winging it when I was first learning. So that might be the reason why so many people aren't passing. But I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. So I definitely think like you brought up a really great point, Anna, because, and for like Bill, like the idea is like the ABO is your foundational knowledge. It's but then there's also the practical portion that that you have. So I think that obviously that there's value in having like that foundational knowledge, which is the ABO basic exam. I think that's why it's called the basic exam. But then there's also a missing portion, I feel, that is like, what are your day-to-day duties, and how do you assess that an optician is successful with their day-to-day duties? I might not have to remember every single layer of the cornea, but it's it's the foundational knowledge. So that's why I'm kind of interested to see what direction we go, or what we find out from the report based on the occupational analysis and compared to the ABO, because I think it's like worth thinking about the foundational knowledge is important, but also like that practical portion that really kind of goes back to like, what are your day-to-day duties?
Yeah, and it seems to me of what the day-to-day duties or the experience, you can, particularly in California, you can know the job and do much better than somebody who even gets a top score on the test, not just merely passing. And of course, the other thing is in California, optometric assistants who we think may be doing some of the same work are required to take no test whatsoever.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of curious to see if, so I think like for like the next steps, like thinking next steps is like the ABO is it everything that we need as far as like, is there anything that we, if we could change it to cater to California? So I'm interested to see what we find out with that. And I also wanted to correct, I keep, Natalia, sorry for saying your name wrong. I just wanted to say, apologize for that.
Happens all the time.
But apologies. Anna or Bill, did you have any more questions or comments about the ABO review?
Nope.
Okay, then I'll open it to public comment.
All right, this is the moderator, and I will open up the Q&A panel. All right, the Q&A panel is now available. So for members of the public, if you would like to make a public comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" and submit it to all panelists. We have instructions on the screen, and if you are not seeing the Q&A panel, please click on the icon of a person next to 3 lines at the bottom middle of your screen. Then you should see the panel to your right. You will go ahead and pause a couple of minutes to give you an opportunity to do that.
I see we have someone wanting to, it's Ruby Garcia wanting to make a comment.
That is correct. So Ruby, hold on a moment and I will unmute you. Ruby, you've been unmuted. You have 2 minutes. Ruby, you've been unmuted. You should be able to speak. Ruby, can you try to speak? And if you're using phone for audio, make sure you've unmuted your phone as well as your computer.
Is it necessary, I apologize, moderator, is it necessary for us to unmute? Because it comes in if you use your phone, you have 2 profiles within the attendee list. We've unmuted her device, but not her phone. Could that possibly be?
That, yes, that could possibly be the issue. I can unmute her mic here, and I have done so, but if her phone's muted, then that would prevent us from hearing her speaking. But she is unmuted at this time.
So moderator, this is the co-moderator.
Yes.
If we can go to the attendee list and also unmute the other device.
Okay.
Or just unmute both attendees by the name of Ruby Garcia.
All right, so I'm just seeing one. Let me refresh my view here. Oh, I see. Okay. Ruby Garcia?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Great. Thank you so much.
Good.
Teamwork.
You can hear me? Perfect. Yes. Okay, I have some exciting news. The California State Society for Opticians has developed some learning modules. And the exciting news is that everyone who's taking the modules, they are passing the first time around, regardless if they've been in the industry 10 years or just a couple of months. And these modules have taken at least 5 years to develop. But slowly, we're going through all the different firms and talking to them, inviting them, and they're passing. So there's some hope. I'd like to be able to report the results to staff so you can see how they're having a great time with it now.
Well, congrats on the pass rate. That's exciting to hear.
Thank you.
And staff, of course, would very much welcome your continued expertise, Ruby. You have always been such a champion for education And I think it's really great that your efforts are panning out in the development of this module. And we would love to continue to understand how you're doing as we continue to develop what the board regulates and how we help or what we expect of licensees in their preparation for our registrations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruby.
Hi, Ruby. This is Bill. Thanks for your input, and thank you for your service and hopefully continued participation.
Yes. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to, this is Shara Murphy, Executive Officer. I think that another interesting part of the research that we're doing will really be to look at the contents of those apprenticeship programs. I think what I'm hearing you say, the notes that I took down from everyone, that there's a need to pair the foundational knowledge with day-to-day duties. And in my mind, that's really what an apprenticeship does. It's that you're reviewing those foundational skills or those foundational concepts and using them directly on the skills that you day-to-day use in your job. So for me, I think it'll be interesting to see what the guidelines are on those states that require apprenticeships. And we can see the timeline in the research that Natalia's done, but it might be of benefit to sort of understand additionally what those high-ranking scores or high-ranking states with apprenticeships, what they require those to sort of look like. I don't know if that would be of interest to board members to see.
I think it'd be because I think it's either two of things. It's the test takers are more educated coming into it, or the test is different. So it's like understanding, is it the test or is it the test takers? So it's like what is their experience, their education? So that's all the unanswered questions. Now.
That's great. Yes, thank you. And we have had great conversations in being a part of the Association of Regulatory Boards of Optometry, and those states where the boards of optometry also regulate opticianry. But I think we can definitely work to make some additional connections to those states who don't have that paired license structure, and understand more fully how their programs work, and understanding exactly that, the test takers, is there information on what those folks look like and what our test takers look like, and whether or not there's a way that we can look at a model that's most successful and then build our system in a way that will also encourage that sort of success, quality, practice, and consumer protection.
Awesome. Thank you.
This is the moderator. We have no more requests for public comment.
Okay, you can close the chat, please.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Shara, did you want to call for a break?
I think that would be great, yes. Do we want to take maybe a 20-minute break or 25, so to allow folks to maybe have an opportunity for bio break, but also to maybe grab a little bit of food before we get into our discussions of the statutes and the regulations and then strategic planning.
Yeah, I figured those were a little bit heftier.
So maybe if we intend to come back at 12:10.
Okay.
Does that work for our members?
It's fine with me.
Okay, excellent.
Fine with me.
Great, then Chair, Chair, I'll just ask you to adjourn the meeting until 12:15.
Of course, yeah. So we'll adjourn until 12:15.